Morning, Tanya. Tanya, morning.
Morning, ma'am. How are you?
Good, good, good. And yourself?
Well, thank you. I can hear you and I can see you clearly.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
you please be seated? Honorable Member, in the interest of safety for all present in the chamber, please keep your mask on and sit in your designated area. Obviously, for as long as you can cope. We appreciate nature can be very, has no rules like we do. The first item on the paper is a motion in the name of the Chief Whip of the majority party. Mayor Catalina, Chief Whip.
When now it's
Chief-
Katerina. It's
No, it's okay.
Castellina.
Castellina, it's all right.
That's my Christian name. You must respect that name. I was given that name by Father Lenz.
Order, Chief Whip. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker, and to honorable members. Honorable members, in respect to our rules, I hereby move that this House, notwithstanding Rule 47, subsection 1, which provides for the sequence of proceedings, resolve that orders number 1 to number 3 be taken before questions today. I so move, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Thank you.
Honorable members, I now put the motion. Are there any objections? No objections, agreed to. The Secretary will read the first order.
Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Police on appointment and introduction of National Forensics Oversight and Ethics Board, DNA boards.
I will now call upon Honorable Tina Jumat Petition to introduce the report.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker, Honorable Chief Whip, Honorable Members, Minister in the House. The fight against crime requires that the entire criminal justice system closes ranks against criminals in our country. A significant factor in making sure that we fight crime effectively is ensuring that there are consequences for anyone committing a crime. Criminals have to know that they will be caught and that there will be consequences for their actions. Our country cannot allow impunity to reign in the administration of justice, and there has to be swift justice for victims of violent crime and gender-based violence. Honorable Deputy Speaker, the National Forensic Oversight and Ethics Board provides us with another weapon and in our arsenal to fight crime and to support the efforts of the police to find the criminals who commit these heinous crimes. The DNA board has a huge responsibility to make sure that in terms of the DNA database, the Department of Police must maintain an offender database. In this regard, it has to maintain the National Forensic DNA database to compare forensic DNA profiles. The Portfolio Committee on Police received these appointments of the board by the Minister on the 2nd of February 2021. The Minister introduced the board to the committee. The following 5 persons from the 5 private sector
Recording in progress.
Mr. D. Morema, Dr. K. Illis, Mr. R. Sono, Dr. M. Yeza, Advocate R. Rawat. These are supported by the following 4 persons from the public sector: Advocate L. Nkosi Thomas, Mr. Rapia, Mr. M. N. L. Mtetwa, Department of Correctional Services, Mrs. A. A. Grove from the Department of Health. Honorable Deputy Speaker, Honorable Whip, I'm sure that you all will join me in wishing the incumbents well for their term in the DNA board. Honorable Deputy Speaker, we have extraordinary challenges with the forensic science laboratories. We have a huge backlog in the testing of DNA samples, and thus the Portfolio Committee has made it one of our priorities to ensure that the processing of DNA sample backlogs must happen with due urgency. This People's Parliament must note that we cannot allow the continued backlogs at the forensic science laboratories to grow. We will will be doing a disservice to the thousands of women and children affected by intimate partner and other forms of gender-based violence. We collectively have to condemn, the ANC condemns, the fact that families of victims cannot proceed to a dignified burial of their loved ones who have been victims of crime because the forensic science laboratories cannot rise to the occasion and conduct timeous forensic analysis of DNA samples, toxicology tests, and the processing of the results. The ANC says this is unacceptable and it must stop, and we condemn it. But in the same breath, we wish to congratulate our minister and the National Commissioner of South African Police Service for the work they have been doing successfully in attending to this backlog. Minister, you are achieving much, but we have to achieve more. Similarly, Honorable Speaker, Deputy Speaker, we are very concerned that the Department of Correctional Services has released 96,875 convicted Schedule 8 offenders on parole without having DNA samples taken. We must make a call on the DNA Forensics Board to take this matter up with urgency it deserves. I want to wish the new DNA board all the best with respect to implementing its mandate and call on the House to support the National Forensic Oversight and Ethics Board. We call on the new board to vigorously fight to make sure that every and any victim of gender-based violence and femicide is really protected through and by this board. We know that the DNA board will rise to the challenge in making sure that SAPS plays the role with respect to the DNA databases. Honorable Speaker, I want to state that we have extraordinary challenges with respect to the processing of DNA samples, but the Portfolio Committee is convinced that the Minister and his team are the correct persons to solve this problem. I thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Members, I now recognize parties wishing to make declarations. The usual times for declaration of votes will apply. We start with the DA.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, the National Forensics Oversight and Ethics Board is appointed by the Minister to serve in terms of Section 15V(2) of the Criminal Law Forensic Procedures Act for a 5-year term of office. Now, the Act makes it clear that the board serves for a period not exceeding 5 years, yet the term of office of the previous board expired in April 2020, while the new board was only appointed 6 months later. The Minister did nothing to preempt this or immediately correct his non-compliance with the Act, which resulted in there being no DNA board in place for a period of 6 months. If the Minister wishes to blame COVID, he would be disingenuous to do so because he knows that he should have commenced with the process to appoint a new board in 2019 already to ensure a seamless transition. Curiously, this critical failure by the Minister is not included in the report before us today. This is just another bungle in a long line of bungles by the Minister in his executive oversight role over the entire DNA and forensics environment, which falls under the SAPS. The Minister was warned in 2019 already that the performance indicators in the quarterly reports from the Forensics Division were pointing to a looming crisis. Yet quarter after quarter, the Minister watched the performance plummet and did nothing. The Minister was also warned in 2019 that the DNA Board's term of office would expire in April 2020, and he was asked what his plans were in 2019 already to prepare to meet the deadline. He ignored the early warnings from the committee and again did little to nothing. The Minister was warned that something was wrong within the SAPS Forensics Division and the National Forensic Science Laboratory, and he knew that the DNA backlog in 2019 was just less than 100,000. Again, the Minister paid lip service to the crisis and sat back as we all watched the backlog skyrocket to what is now almost 250,000 case exhibits today. The Minister has been repeatedly warned that his failure to bring the DNA Amendment Bill to Parliament for the past 4 years is compromising the criminal justice system due to violent Schedule 8 offenders being released on parole without having their DNA added to the National Convicted Offenders DNA database. Today, we know that almost 96,800 convicted Schedule 8 offenders have been released on parole without their DNA being added onto this database because the Minister and his colleagues in Cabinet are sitting on their hands while the bill gathers dust. The reason the Minister has given Parliament for the delay is that he and the Minister of Home Affairs are investigating the possibility of a national DNA database to which every single South African will have to submit their DNA, a delusional DNA dystopia in the mold of communist China. Now, while the entire forensics ecosystem has deteriorated dramatically in the last year, the burning question is, where is the DNA board? What have they done to intervene? Have they requested meetings with Parliament? Have they briefed the Minister? And how many times has the board actually convened to consider the catastrophic state of the SAPS Forensics Division and our laboratories? They've been in office for almost a year already. In terms of the Act, the board must meet at least 3 times quarterly. So by now they should have met must meet quarterly. So now they should have met at least 3 times as they were appointed in October last year. The board has only appeared before Parliament once to introduce themselves. The Oversight Board has a critical role to play in holding SAPS accountable to the DNA Act, but they appear to be missing in action, perhaps because they have been ostensibly been replaced by the DNA Technical Task Team in the Office of the Presidency, far from the prying eyes of Parliament. The entire edifice upon which our DNA and forensics capability depends is crumbling. Our laboratories are grinding to a halt, the Act is not being fully implemented, and violent criminals are being released on parole without their DNA being loaded onto the convicted offenders database. Deputy Speaker, if we are to prevent the complete collapse of our DNA forensics environment, this House must demand that the DNA Board and the Minister, not just the South African Police Service, provide monthly reports to Parliament on the steps that they are taking as a board to resolve the crisis we are facing. Honourable members, if our DNA forensics capability collapses, we will lose the most powerful weapon we have to fight violent crime in South Africa. We need to unite behind this issue and demand accountability from the executive, but unfortunately the DA cannot support this report because of the omission of the Minister's failure to comply with the Act. Thank you.
EFF.
Chairperson, at the beginning of this year, the forensic backlog stood at about 180,000 cases. These are cases of rape, murder, housebreaking, and many more. The failure of forensic lab had led to the acquittal of dangerous criminals, rapists, murderers, because of the evidence against them is simply not forthcoming. This is indicative of the general death of leadership across the police, but particularly with normal national forensics. The National Forensics and Ethics Board is mandated to provide ethical oversight over the forensic department in the police. This, to us, is a very limited scope because it merely deals with manages complaints related to the taking, retention, and the use of all DNA samples and forensic DNA profiles. This is necessary to prevent abuse of processes by the police, but we also submit that the failure of the forensic laboratory to perform its functions is a grave legal and ethical affront on the constitutional rights of victims of crime. The board must be empowered to deal with these violations of rights of citizens to competent forensic services in the Republic. But it is impossible for the DNA board to do so because it is appointed based on the likes or dislikes of the minister, who remains its executive authority. The proposed names of the DNA board were submitted to Parliament by the minister, and it is very unlikely that his very own appointments would have any leg to stand on when the minister is on the wrong side of the law. The appointment of the DNA board must be done in a manner that is transparent, and Parliament must have a say in the shortlisting and interviewing of the members of the board. We cannot simply be expected to rubber stamp decisions taken by Begikele in some dark corners here. We reject this report.
Honorable member, you know the rules requires of you not to call a member the way you do. So if you do that again, it will mean that you are being contemptuous of the rules of parliament. You dare not do that. And we will apply the rules absolutely strictly. IFP.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. The IFP welcomes the appointment of the Second National Forensic and Ethics Board as instructed by the Criminal Law Forensic Procedures Amendment Act. The work that the DNA board must undertake is critical to the functioning of our justice system, and it cannot be overstated. The IFPs trust that the board members who have had a few months to settle into their role will work diligently to consistently clear the DNA case backlog and implement mechanisms and systems that will improve the service. The IFP urges the DNA board to step in urgently and assist in righting the dysfunctional state of the National Forensic Science Laboratories at a quicker pace. In March, when the board was appointed, the backlog stood at 172,787 cases. The IFP recognizes that this number has been reduced to 166,327 over the last 5 months. While this is indeed a welcome improvement, at this rate, the backlog will only be cleared in January 2023. The IFP recognizes that even in this optimistic outlook, because of the slow rate in which new entries are being processed, according to the Department of Police, between April and August, almost 115,000 new DNA cases were registered. By 19 August, only 38% of these cases had been processed. This is concerning, especially when we consider the increasing rate of contact crimes that rely on the National Forensic Science Laboratories for resolutions, the most worrying being the high rates of gender-based violence, femicide, sexual assault, and other violent crimes. Justice delayed is justice denied. And every person who has to wait years for a resolution is one person too many. Families, friends, and communities are depending on the National Forensic Science Laboratories for closure. The delay also allows violent criminals to continue to torment our communities. This problem is not new, and the IFP remains concerned over the last 20 years. The resolution seems to elude us. The IFP supports the report. Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. FF Plus.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, when we talk about legislation and to ensure that that is enforced, if there is one department who must see to that, that is the Department of Police. The Minister for Police must set the example to ensure that when there are specific legislation applicable, that he comply to that legislation and set an example to the people of South Africa, because it is the police service that ensures that they enforce legislation. We have here an example where the Honourable Minister did not comply. So he sets a very bad example to the people of South Africa. And that is part of the problem of South Africa, that people feel that, yes, we have good legislation, but when it comes to the enforcing of certain legislation, it doesn't matter. Honourable Deputy Speaker, there's a real crisis when it comes to the DNA in the police services. We have the DNA board appointed here, and it is part of the obligations to ensure that there is proper oversight on the forensics laboratories, specifically when it comes to the police services. But Honourable Deputy Speaker, the backlog on DNA samples only for gender-based violence increased from May this year with more than 22,000 to the 18th of August. By the 18th of August, we had more than 90,000 samples of backlog when it comes to DNA, specifically referring to gender-based violence. Dit was gesê dat as daar van 1 Julie af alles 100% operasioneel is binne die laboratoriums, dan sal die agterstand weggewerk kan word. Die agterstand vergroot, want daar is sekere toerusting in die laboratoriums waarvan die sertifikate in terme van kalibrering nie voltooi kan word nie as gevolg van 'n gebrek aan fondse, die stryd in terme van leweransiers, en dit is daardie kleiner jakkalsies wat juis die wingerde verwoes. Daarom is die beroep van die Vryheidsfront Plus dat daar daadwerklik opgetree sal word. En die vrylating van gevangenisse wat meer as, soos wat ons gehoor het, in 'n omgewing van 96.800 is, wat geen DNS monsters van geneem is nie, ondermyn die strafregstelsel.
Deputy Speaker, can I call order, please?
Expired. Your time has expired, sir. ACDP.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, the ACDP believes that the backlog at the National Forensic Science Laboratories is absolute. Backlog has a direct impact on the functioning of the criminal justice system, and the people of South Africa, the victims of crime, are the real losers in this debacle. Deputy Speaker, we have seen the DNA case log grow year after year. We've seen ineffective and corrupt supply chain management systems that prevent laboratory and mortuary workers from accessing basic materials they require. Forensic units remain in a state of decay. Staff are overburdened, under-resourced. In serving our people, these essential workers too are often robbed of their dignity. Preventable failures have led to unacceptable delays. Families whose loved ones are victims of crime often cannot proceed with their burials. They remain in a state of limbo. They are being robbed of the justice and dignity they deserve. And then the victims of crime are therefore double victims. First of all, their perpetrators, and then again of a state that robs them of their dignity when it comes to identification facilities at the laboratories. Due to all of these wrongdoings and failures, the new board clearly has their hands full. And we know from this report what the central problems faced by the board are, but we share the concerns expressed about the board and not accounting to Parliament to report on the progress it has made in solving these issues. The ACDP welcomes the new board's action plan to attend to contract management problems, to establish a forensic investigating unit and drive down the DNA case backlog, but accounting to Parliament is crucial. We also are concerned about operational competence, and we again call for intensified and improved capacity. We need to build expertise and ensure that we not only attend to long outstanding issues, but strategically prevent new ones. The crisis at the DNA labs must be addressed urgently. Lastly, we share the concerns expressed that almost 96,000 convicted Schedule 8 prisoners have been released without their DNA samples being taken due to the DNA amendment bill not being passed. This is absolutely disgraceful and seriously impacts the fight against crime and must be corrected and addressed without delay. Regrettably, Deputy Speaker, the ACDP, in light of these issues, cannot support this report. I thank you.
Thank you. UDM.
Deputy Speaker, thank you very much. The United Democratic Movement also doesn't support this report. Isizathu sethu sesokuba ingxaki inye into ba while urhulumente elibele kuzama ukuthi kulungisa lento ethatha ithuba lakhe kungalandelwa imigaqo-nkqubo yomthetho. Ingxaki into ba abantu bangaphandle ngakumbi abo bahlukunyezwe ngabantu, zii-criminals, bafumanisa ukuthi justice ayide iserve kubo kuba kukho le delay kwi-DNA samples. Iyabachaphazela abantu bakuthi le nto ngobuninzi babo. Basithumile kuba sizokwazi ubathethelela apha. Kodwa ke amanyathelo afana nento yokuba Deputy Speaker kuzanywe ukuba kubekho ibhodi entsha iphinde ibe ne-action plan yayo. Ayancedisana nokuzama ukusombulula le meko ikhona. Kufuneka ke sibe nendlela siyindlu yowuso-mthetho yokuyigqala lo mgaqo-nkqubo wabo siwujonge ngaba uzawuncedisana nanoku-addressa the backlogs of almost 200,000 samples. Now, these are challenges ekufana ukuthi iParliament ibe kanti iyangenelela ngaphakathi nokuthi kuprovide proper oversight over the National Forensic Science Laboratories. Ile bhodi kodwa le bhodi kufuneka ibe nendlela ethungelana nayo neParliament kuba abantu bakuthi xa bechaphazelwa ile National Forensic Science Laboratories nomsebenzi wayo nokuthi delay DNA samples beza kuthi the representatives of the people abazi babaleke baye emapoliseni nakwibhodi engekho accountable to Parliament. Kufuneka sibekho indlela ukuthi thina representatives of the people sibe nendlela okungena sikwazi ukuthetha sikwazi ukubona ukuthi sintoni ingxaki sizothi xa sibuyele kwi-constituencies sikwazi uphendula abantu bakuthi ewe yona inqanaba lithathiweyo it's a step in the right direction kodwa kufuneka sifunde ukwenza into ngendlela in future. Siyabulela.
Thank you. ATM.
Deputy Speaker, we are not debating this matter.
Good. Good. NFP, Chief Whip kahle, kawehlisa izwi lakho. Manje we are in Parliament. Kubona ukuthetha kanje mawuhlele isiteke. Khona lo muntu ongale kumfula. Manje sikulalela sonke la endlini ukuthetha kanje. Sicela ukuthi ungayenzi lento. AIC. Cope. PAC. Al-Jamaa. ANC.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. The National Forensic Oversight and Ethics Board consists of 5 persons from outside the public sector with knowledge and experience in forensic science, human rights law, as well as ethics related. The level of expertise and experience of these individuals allows the DNA board to execute its mandate effectively. The board provides oversight over the processes relating to the collection, retention, storage, destruction, and disposal of the DNA samples, the retention and the removal of forensic DNA profiles, as well as the breach in respect of taking, transporting, analysis, storing, and use of communication of forensic DNA samples, as well as forensic DNA profiles. Importantly, the board must also monitor the performance of the Forensic Science Laboratory of the South African Police Service, as well as the National Forensic DNA Database, and ensuring minimum standards are complied with and adhered to. The board must also ensure compliance with ethical and privacy issues. Ethically, the discussion center on a balance between the rights of individual as well as the rights of society. Concerns expressed by society are that the DNA profiling may violate an individual's genetic privacy. Honorable Deputy Speaker, the challenge of the DNA testing have been well documented. The long-standing challenges regarding the DNA analysis backlog have resulted in tragic consequences for the victims of, particularly women and children, and also impacted negatively on the criminal justice system. Consensus that cannot be downplayed by the current DNA analysis challenges as a result of continuous backlog that we are seeing. We recently hosted the Women's Parliament, during which the challenges experienced with the gender-based violence and femicides. Hence, we support the fact that this board should be considered on that. Honorable Deputy Speaker, between April and June 2021, overall sexual offences increased with a significant 74.1% compared to that of the previous financial year. During this period, SEPS recorded 12,702 cases of sexual offences, which the highest number of cases was in this 5-year period. Of the total sexual offences, and 10,006 were rape cases, representing 78.7% as in the total. All subcategories except contact sexual offences recorded the highest number in the 5-year between 2017 and 18, as well as 2021 and 2022. The current backlog in the gender-based violence related DNA analysis is around 90,201 cases. This is unacceptably high. The SEPS is failing the women of South Africa. However, we are confident in solutions initiated by SEPS to address the significant backlog and bring justice to victims of gender-based violence. We are intensifying our oversight over the DNA analysis backlog reduction program. The reduction program, hence what the opposition have just stated, there is progress in what the minister is planning to do. The minister does not fold his hand, he does not sit at a corner. He's doing something, because if he was not doing anything, we could have not had this backlog reduction program that speaks to that SAPS, especially on the diversion of contact management strategy, public-private partnership, and the appointment of the Forensic Service Technical Advisory Committee. Honorable Speaker, Deputy Speaker, the criminal law, which is the Forensic Procedure Amendment Act number 37 of 2013, came into operation in January 2015. The transitional operation includes of buccal samples from all individuals of Schedule 8 offenders of the purpose of forensic DNA. Within a period of 2 years from the date of commence of the Act, the period of transition expires on the 31st of January 2017. As a result, buccal samples still need to be taken from convicted Schedule 8 offenders whose buccal sample were not taken prior to the date of commence of the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 2013. It must be noted, it is very important, this is only applies to that individual convicted before the act commenced. DNA samples are taken from all convicted individuals. Honorable Speaker, Deputy Speaker, the Minister has approved the amendment bill for further processing of Cabinet Committee of the GCPS cluster. A request for approval of the bill for introduction in Parliament shall be sought to Cabinet, and the date is away to brief the Minister. We call on the Minister to frustrate the tabling of the amendment bill to ensure the taking of the DNA samples from convicts incarcerated between or prior to 2015. Honorable Deputy Speaker, I want to wish the new DNA ethics and call on the board members to execute their mandate without fear or favor. DNA remains one of the most effective crime-effecting tools, and we need effective control and functioning of the DNA database. In so, the ANC support the report. I thank you, Deputy Speaker. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I now recognize the Honorable the Chief Whip of the Majority Party. Madam Chief Whip.
I apologize. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I move that this House adopt this report. Thank you very much.
Honorable members, the motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections?
Yes, indeed, Chairperson. The DA is not in agreement with this report and therefore ask that you note our objection. Thank you.
We will note your objection.
Deputy Speaker, please note the ACDP. ACDP as well. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Objection?
Okay, we'll do that.
Deputy Speaker, please note the objection of the FF+.
Okay.
And the and the Progressive United Democratic Movement.
The EFF object.
Okay. Honorable members, the objections will be noted, otherwise the report is agreed to. Before I move to the second order, Honorable Chris Honsinger has drawn my attention to the presence of a new member in our ranks, Nicholas Mayberg. Welcome, Honorable Member. Honorable Mayberg, in future, you listen to the chair, not to the crowd. There must be order in the house. Your induction will otherwise be faulty, if I allow you. Welcome, welcome. The secretary will read the second order.
Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Police Interview Panel on interviews for candidates for Critical Infrastructure Council on 8 to 10 June 2021.
Honorable Tina Petition, I see you walked already. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker, Honorable Chief Whip. Indeed, the Portfolio Committee of Police has been working. The Critical Infrastructure Protection Act was assented to and promulgated by the President on the 28th of November 2019. The Act replaced the old National Key Points Act of 1980, and the purpose of the Critical Infrastructure Protection Act was, amongst others, to provide for the identification and declaration of infrastructure as critical infrastructure, to provide for guidelines and factors to be taken into account to ensure that there is transparent identification and declaration of critical infrastructure. Honorable members, this parliament is sacrosanct. The security at this parliament has to be beefed up so that we understand the critical infrastructure that this parliament is, and we do not allow all and sundry to pass through our security systems. Honorable members, Honorable Deputy Speaker and Whip, when we did these interviews, 90% of these candidates who came for the interviews, we did the interviews physically in Parliament. 90% of them walked through without security clearance, without being checked. They had access to this building without security clearance, and this is a critical infrastructure complex. This is secured, it's a national key point. We have recommended Advocate Lufuno Korombi, Mr. Willie Renier de Prier, Ms. Kaletso Lefutani, Mr. Grandson, Mr. Richard Zita, Vincent Mello, Mr. Rambo Patience Mbava, Eugene van Rooyen, and Ms. Selinyani. Honorable Minister, it's youth, they are young, they are vibrant, they have technical skills. Advocate Lufuna is a tech guru who is going to help you with all kinds of cyber crime. Honorable Minister and members, Chief Whip, Deputy Speaker, I'm a child of the Koi and the Sun. You know, sometime last week, I wore a leopard skin which was handed down from the Koi. It is not, please, I'm not breaching any protocol because I don't wear skins, but this was handed down. So I'm a child of the Koi and the Sun. But the Koi and the Sun cannot be camping out at union buildings, planting marijuana and dacha and vegetables. Union buildings is a national key point and must be respected. They must be removed, Honorable Minister. So, Honorable members, our view is that the need for the National Key Points Act to be updated has been achieved, and we firmly believe that the new Critical Infrastructure Protection Act rises to the challenge of the 21st century. Our harbors, our ports, our ESCOM, those are key points. Now, the nomination lists include all the requisite skills you require, Minister. Please, when you select 5, consider what the committee is presenting to you. We will be able to receive and consider your applications, Minister, your assessments, your recommendations and reports on critical infrastructure. But we will not only accept recommendations, we'll also consider how the police will be monitoring these key points. Honorable Minister, we cannot always call in the SANDF. The police are protecting this precinct. They must do their job and they must do so properly. These honorable members must not be taken for granted. Their security is not fashionable. It is not some kind of privilege. This parliament is our inheritance. We fought for it. We shed our blood for it. It must be secured. Ke a leboga, baie dankie, nkosi kakhulu.
Thank you. I now recognize parties wishing to make a declaration. The DA.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, honorable members, South Africans, the Critical Infrastructure Protection Act, Act 8 of 2019, was assented to and promulgated by the President on the 28th of November 2019. The Act replaced the old National Key Point Act, Act 102 of 1918. This Act applies to the identification and declaration of infrastructure as critical infrastructure, determination of critical infrastructure as critical infrastructure complex, and the protection of critical infrastructure. Deputy Speaker, in a country like South Africa, I am convinced that the majority of us will agree that critical infrastructure must be properly listed, maintained, controlled, and secured because of its importance to the country as a whole. Ons is bewus daarvan dat daar 'n geweldige agterstand is om hierdie baie belangrike bate van die land behoorlik te identifiseer, behoorlik te bestuur en veral behoorlik in stand te hou. The Act is establishing a critical infrastructure council and compels the Minister of Police to appoint the following persons: the Secretary for the Police Service, an official at the level of at least Chief Director or an equivalent level designated by each of the heads of the following departments: Department of Defense, Department of Home Affairs, Department of Public Works, National Disaster Center, South African Local Government Association, South African Police Service, and State Security Agency, and then, most importantly, 5 members appointed in terms of subsection 8 from the private sector and civil society, appropriately qualified, knowledgeable in all the respective fields. Dit is presies waarmee ons nou besig is op hierdie stadium. The process for Parliament to nominate 10 members of the private and civil society sectors are contained in Section 4.7 of the Critical Infrastructure Protection Act. The Speaker referred the matter to the Portfolio Committee on Police, who followed a proper prescribed process to submit the list of names to the National Assembly. The committee received 42 applications on the advert placed in the media, of which 37 applicants met the minimum requirements and shortlisted 20. Panel eventually interviewed 17 remaining candidates between the 8th and the 10th June 2021. And then our chairperson have, just informed Parliament about the names that was decided on. The attached name list indicate the performance of the candidates during the interviews, as scored by members of the interview panel. The Minister of Police must now appoint 5 of these candidates to serve on the Critical Infrastructure Council. All candidates were properly vetted by the State Security Agency, and their academic qualifications were checked by the Human Resources Division for correctness. The process must be finalized now. to allow the Critical Infrastructure Council to be established without delay and start its important task. Almost 2 years have passed since the promulgation of this act, and it must now be implemented as a matter of urgency. The South African Police Service and all the partaking departments have a very important role to play in the administration of this act. This must be done under the watchful eye of the Critical Infrastructure Council. The Democratic Alliance support this report. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. EFF.
Deputy Speaker, it is now 34 months since the Critical Infrastructure Protection Act was passed into law. One of this act's main instruments is the establishment of the Critical Infrastructure Council. That it has taken this long to interview and recommend for appointment of members of this Critical Infrastructure Council should be a source of shame to the efficiency of this parliament. The country needs this council to function properly, to replace the Apartheid-era National Key Points Act and its somehow draconian provisions on what constitutes national key points. We supported the passing of the Critical Infrastructure Bill, both at the National Assembly and the NCOP, and are supportive of the work the Critical Infrastructure Council is mandated to perform. We participated in the interview processes for the selection of these councillors and have no issues with the appointment of any of those shortlisted. But we must mention that we are worried about the emergence and entrenchment of securocracy under the leadership of this particular administration, which is only too happy to use whatever excuse under the sun to suppress opposing views. Parliament must remain vigilant to put an end to this tendency promoted by Mr. Ramaphosa, the President. The Critical Infrastructure Act is one of those pieces of legislation which may be abused by a paranoid and insecure government such as the one we have today to further suppress the rights of citizens under the guise that critical infrastructure is at risk. We will oppose all emerging dictatorial advances by the ruling party, which has lost all moral authority to lead this nation and has resorted to leading through the use of force. The police and the courts must refuse to be used by those who have plundered our country for their own narrow ends. We therefore support this report. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. IFP.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. The IFP welcomes the interviewing of candidates for the Critical Infrastructure Council Act. We recognize that the process was conducted in a transparent, fair, consultative, and consensus-seeking manner to ensure that fit and proper people, as well as the best-suited candidates, will be appointed. The IFP trusts that the council will be appointed with agency as the House rises in preparation for the local government elections. While the process has been transparent, it has been long and with many interruptions. It will do the committee and the country well to push for speedy appointments and allow the appointees to begin serving their 5-year term. The IFP recognizes the qualifications of the shortlisted individuals and believes that they possess the appropriate knowledge and experience in the relevant fields, as they will be serving on the body that often deals with sensitive information and structures. They are a welcome addition to the oversight and protection of our critical infrastructure. The IFP is particularly interested to see how the council, once appointed, will engage with key stakeholders and the public. We know the Critical Infrastructure Act replaces the controversial and draconian piece of legislation that often punished civilians arbitrarily to conduct in places considered to be the national key points. The IFP trusts that the council will continue to consider and make a recommendation to respect of applications for places to be designated as critical infrastructure in a way that encapsulates our constitutional principles. The IFP accepts the report. Thank you.
Thank you. FF Plus.
Deputy Speaker, no declaration.
Thank you. ACDP.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, the ACDP supports the report. Thank you.
Thank you. UDM.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I-United Democratic Movement nayo iyayixhasa le report. Izizathu zezokuba kakade kufaneleke thina njengesikhokelo nangorhulumente i-critical infrastructure rather sibe nendlela esiyazi ukuthi siyikhusela ngayo, siqiniseke futhi into yoba ayiyondawo yodakasela. Kuba kaloku ingaphela imingxunya ezihange ukuba siyiqondanga okanye ufumanise ukuthi isidima sayo sijongeleka phantsi. Okubalulekileyo nenye into esiyithandayo into yoba kweli tyeli eyona nto siyizamayo kuqinisekisa ukuthi there's a balance phakathi kokuprotect critical infrastructure nekukhuseleni amalungelo abantu boMzantsi Afrika ekubeni babe nendlela eqondileyo ukuyisebenzisa infrastructure nokuyi-accessa. Okunye okubalulekileyo ukuthi into yoba sibona ukuthi kule council aba bantu babekiweyo abanachaphazo okanye abanabala likantsho ngesiXhosa. Bangabantu abanothi uba banowunika umsebenzi bawunikwe ngendlela bangawenza kuba isakhono nolwazi likhona. Bazayidinga ke inkxaso yethu nokuthi thina siyipalamente sibaqwalasele siqiniseke ukuthi benza le nto ifana ukuthi bayayenza. Siyabulela.
Thank you. ATM. Good. NFP. AIC. Hope. PAC. Al-Jamaa. ANC.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker, members of the National Assembly. The African National Congress supports the appointment of the Critical Infrastructure Council. The Critical Infrastructure Council plays a central and critical role in the protection of the country's key infrastructure such as transport, goods, and services. The government has the responsibility of ensuring that the critical infrastructure is protected against any possible threat that might arise from natural disaster, terrorist, or non-governmental grouping, invasion, and cyber threat. The protection of critical infrastructure includes, among others, the vast network of highways, connecting bridges, channels, and railway. It is important to keep these different facilities in good shape as they are needed for the operation of the society and to maintain normalcy in the daily life and the well-being of the South African people. The Critical Infrastructure Act of 2019 provides an outline of the identification and declaration of infrastructure as critical infrastructure, and it will also determine the critical infrastructure as critical infrastructure complex and protection. The critical infrastructure needs to be protected because they play a critical role in the economic growth of the country. They are capital intensive and high cost investment of the country, and they are vital to the country's economic development and prosperity. The Critical Infrastructure Act provides a clear process to follow in reference to the appointment of the Infrastructure Council, and indeed, the process as outlined in the Act was duly followed. Honorable Speaker, Honorable Deputy Speaker, the Speaker of the National Assembly referred the matter to the relevant committee of the National Assembly to publish the notice and also to advertise to newspapers. The committee was discharged with responsibility of doing the shortlisting process. Instruction was that it must not be less than 20 people who are disqualified in terms of Section 5 of the Critical Infrastructures Act. The Popular Committee on Police has also followed the due processes and all steps as set out in the legislation. Further, the advert was placed in the newspaper with a closing date which was set to be on the 22nd February 2021. The Popular Committee received 42 applications and 2 applicants did not meet the deadline and 1 applicant unfortunately passed away during the processes. In total, 37 applicants met the minimum requirement. The committee finalized the list of 20 candidates for the interviews, and the committee wrote to the Speaker's office to facilitate the process of vetting by the State Security Agency for 20 applicants for the Critical Infrastructure Council on the 14th of April 2021. The Popular Committee presented the final list of 20 candidates to the State Security Agency for vetting processes and to the Human Resource Division to verify on their qualifications. The processes was undertaken in May 2021 and all candidates were vetted, and out of all of them, only 1 was flagged for a possible criminal record. The interview process took place on the 8th to 10th of June 2021. Different political parties were part of the interviews, and the interview were conducted physically in Parliament offices in Cape Town, and 10 candidates were recommended for the appointment as members of the Critical Infrastructure Council. That was the last steps of the processes, and the processes was fully and correctly followed. Honorable Deputy Speaker, given the fact that all processes was correctly followed on the appointment of the Critical Infrastructure Council as stipulated in the Act, and therefore the ANC support the report. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize the Honorable, the Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Ha ke lebohe Deputy Speaker, ke tsitsinya hore tlaelo ena e beuweng mona re ya moele re le ntlo ena ya Parliament. Ke a leboha.
Ke a leboha mme. The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections? No objections. Agreed to. The third order, the Secretary will read the third order.
Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Police on petition of Mrs. Nicky Kinnear on the death of her husband, Lieutenant Colonel Charl Kinnear.
Honorable Jumaat Petition is weer terug.
Ek werk vir my brood vandag. Baie dankie agbare adjunct speaker. Ons het hierdie petisie gehoor. Honorable Deputy Speaker and honorable members, the killing of police officers cannot go unchallenged. We have lost too many police officers in the line of duty, and we have just heard from our Honorable President Ramaphosa at the commemoration of police officers who've given the ultimate sacrifices for defending and protecting all our lives. On Sunday, the Minister, the National Commissioner, the Deputy Minister, the President commemorated Police Day, which is dedicated to remembering our fallen heroes and heroines. My apologies that I could not make it, Honorable Minister. According to SAPS, 34 police officers lost their lives in the call of duty between the 1st of April 2019 to 31st of March 2021. Another 860 police officers succumbed to COVID. All of us need the police. We need their security to go about our daily business. For the police officers to lose their lives in the course of duty is a blow to our country. It is a blow to our national security. Lieutenant Colonel Charl Kinnear was one of a kind of police officer who dedicated his life to protecting the lives of others. In his fight against violent crime and gangsterism, his investigation into corrupt police officers selling weapons to gangsters who heard led directly to his death. Our committee heard the cry of his wife, Ms. Nicolette Kinnear, Her family, her sons, they were crying and they are still crying out for justice. Mr. Kinnear, we promise you, your husband's life will not have been lived in vain. We will get to the bottom of the death of your husband. Honorable members and Honorable Deputy Speaker, the cry of the widow has been for justice. The police have arrested a few gangsters and they are currently being charged for the murder of Colonel Kinnear. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. We have to thank the leadership of SAPS for giving this matter its full attention, as the attack on a police officer is an attack on the state. The Portfolio Committee received an unsolicited petition referred by the Speaker from Mrs. Kinnear, and the Portfolio Committee met on the 21st of February 2021 to consider the petition. It was concerning to all the members that SAPS was warned that Colonel Kinnear was being followed and that other officers associated with the investigation into gangsters were on a hit list and could be killed. Despite the information provided to SAPS, Colonel Kinnear was killed on the 18th of September 2020. It caused distress not only to his family, but it caused distress to our nation. It caused distress to a community who believed in him. Many people really supported Colonel Kinnear and respected the work he was doing. He changed the lives of many people. For the sake of his wife and children, let us find closure. If there has been any collusion between police officers and gangsters in the death of a seasoned detective, we condemn this categorically. We are thankful that after this long investigation, someone has been charged with his murder. But is this enough? Certainly, Honorable Deputy Speaker, we do not believe that this is enough. I thank you.
You recognize political parties wishing to make a declaration. The DA.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, here I am. Member, the report that this House is considering at the moment is no ordinary report, but embodies all the complexities and intrigues playing out in the South African Police Service at the moment. The late Lieutenant Colonel Charl Kinnear is one of the unfortunate victims of the current battle raging on in the South African Police Service, currently between two opposing factions for the sole and control of this important institution. Ordinary police practices and investigative methods failed and did not provide the desired solutions to solve this cruel, bloody murder, and the Kinnear family were obliged to approach Parliament to enforce proper police action. The Portfolio Committee on Police met on the 23rd of February to hear Mrs. Kinnear's petition. The following negative aspects were conveyed to the committee: death threats, alleged unlawful phone tapping and surveillance, attempted murder, a failed hand grenade attack, failure to provide protection, malicious transfer, victimization, ignored representations to senior management, including the National Commissioner. Yes, like so many South African citizens are experiencing daily, the criminal justice system is also failing Mrs. Kinnear and her family. Even as we speak, this case is still not finalized. The Kinnear family wants to know who is responsible for this failure and what consequence management will be instituted. Lieutenant Colonel Kinnear was only doing his job and paid with his life for this effort. Surely, the police management has a lot to answer. Corrupt elements must be rooted out of the police. Minister Kelly played the innocent game again. Yet another incident that he was not properly informed about and obviously not even concerned about. Our National Commissioner positioned himself again very carefully behind his policies, assessments, etc., and his normal done and dusted stance. The reality, however, is that he did not respond to the 59-page letter from Lieutenant Kinnear addressed to him personally. Now, General Sitole, the question is, did you receive that letter? And if no, who else received it? And then, more importantly, what was done about it? The state of the South African Police Service is really a serious matter. The National Commissioner is on record where he admitted to the Portfolio Committee that the SAPS is no longer able to fulfill its Section 205 constitutional responsibilities, meaning that the police can no longer prevent, combat, and investigate crime, cannot maintain public order, cannot protect and secure the inhabitants of the Republic and their property, and cannot uphold and enforce the law. The citizens of South Africa, apparently you are on your own. The recent unrest in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng proved that this is in fact a true reflection of the operational ability of the police at the moment. Something drastically needs to be done. This state of affairs cannot be allowed to continue any longer. The police must be restructured and transformed. The devolution of certain police functions to provincial level must be pursued. The friction between the minister and the national commissioner must be addressed. The current national commissioner is compromised and his suitability to serve further in his post must be determined. The Supreme Court of Appeal upheld a High Court judgment that he and two other members of the police management had breached their duties and makes his job as head of SAPS now untenable. The faction fight amongst the top echelon must be solved. The public have lost faith in the police's ability to protect them and ensure their safety. The crime stats are spiraling out of control. The apparent deep-rooted factional division within the SAPS and its politicization make the finding of internal solutions almost impossible, and I therefore call on the state president to intervene. The DA support the report. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
EFF.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Gangs are able to flourish the way they do in the Western Cape because they have managed to capture the highest levels of police authorities in this province and nationally. Criminal elements have infiltrated each and every level of the police in this country, and these have emboldened criminals because they have full knowledge that they are protected by powerful forces within law enforcement agencies. This leaves honest, hardworking, and ethical police officers, such as the late Colonel Charl Kinnear, alone and at risk. Their lives are at risk because they must not only fight dangerous criminals out there, but must also focus on the enemy within. The death of Colonel Kinnear was the clearest indication that our police force in the Western Cape is rotten to the core. Everyone in the police knew that the colonel was investigating high-profile drug lords. It was known that these drug lords were and are still working with the high-profile police officers. The colonel was offered police protection, and that protection was withdrawn, which led to his untimely death. Why must it take so long to determine who authorized the removal of his protection and the reasons for such a removal? Why must it take so long to figure out who within the police worked with the gangsters to assassinate the colonel? What message is this sending to other dedicated and honest police officers in the Western Cape? Do we want to offer them no hope at all, that they are appreciated and protected by the state they are serving so diligently? The EFF would like to take this opportunity to thank Mrs. Nicky Kinnear for her bravery and her dedication to her husband's memory. It takes a brave person to confront the rot in the police that led to the death of her husband, the way she has confronted it. We will continue demanding answers from the police. In the police leadership, if the police leadership had any dignity left, the National Commissioner would have resigned. And Jeremy Very would have accounted for their failure to protect Colonel Kinnear. The leadership of the police are a very shameful branch who cannot even protect their own ethical and dedicated members. We accept this report and commit to never let the death of Colonel Kinnear go unpunished. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. IFP.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. The cold-blooded requires from us as Parliament to demand answers from the South African Police Service and the Minister of Police, Lieutenant Colonel Kinnear's death not only robbed his children and wife of a father and husband, but came at a great cost in the fight against organized crime in South Africa. As the committee, we have heard the plea of Mrs. Nicky Kinnear. She has called for justice to be served and for the rot in the SAPS, which failed to protect her husband, to be exposed and be rooted out. There are many unanswered questions, such as why protection for Lieutenant Colonel Charl Kinnear was removed and what his own investigation revealed. The IFP strongly agrees with the claim on the committee's agenda until the committee has been able to get much needed answers. We cannot sit back and allow corruption in the SAPS to spread. Organized crime is flourishing in this corrupt environment, and any fight would be futile if we do not also destroy the rot in the SAPS. Our latest crime statistics paint a very grim picture of what we as South Africans face and call on the police for a national strategy to address the horrifying increase in reported murders and organized crime. From April to June alone, there has been an increase of 66.2% in murders reported compared to the same period last year, according to the SAPS latest quarterly crime statistics. We have brave men and women who are risking their lives investigating drug lords and gang members, simultaneously fighting against corrupt police officials and state officials. These honorable men and women literally embody all that is good in mankind in ensuring justice is served. We cannot allow the legacy of these brave police, such as Lieutenant Colonel Kinnear, to be forgotten. We have to honor their lives and their courage in fighting to keep our children safe. The IFP therefore feels strongly that this matter needs to be closely monitored by Parliament, and we simply cannot accept the vague responses from the Minister of Police and the National Commissioner of Police that internal processes are proceeding without within SAPS. The Kinnear family and the public deserve progress reports by the Minister of Investigation and the IPID. And
Thank you, Mayor. Your time has expired anyway. Thank you very much. FF Plus.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, the FF Plus supports the report. I thank you.
Thank you. ACDP. Steve.
Thank you. Speaker, Maurice Sukkers, Honourable Sukkers is ready.
Honourable Sukkar, connection problems. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Shall I proceed?
Yes, please. Go ahead, ma'am.
Deputy Speaker, Mrs. Kinnear's petition documented in the report of the Committee on Police provides us with a timeline of events surrounding the tragic death of her husband, Lieutenant Colonel Charl Kinnear. The ACDP wants to reiterate and add to some of the questions raised by Mrs. Nicky Kinnear. First, who are the rogue police officers attached to the Western Cape Crime Intelligence Unit who threatened Colonel Kinnear and his family? Have they been apprehended? And if not, why not? When these individuals were investigated and named by IPID, who made recommendations to the NPA that they be criminally prosecuted? And why did the NPA not follow through and do so? Why was the Provincial Crime Intelligence Unit made up of the very people that Colonel Kinnear felt he could not trust, tasked with investigating the threats that Colonel Kinnear and his family felt they were under? Why were the same members of this unit accused by Colonel Kinnear of following him and intercepting his calls, placed under official protection following the murder of Colonel Kinnear? Why, if Colonel Kinnear's name appeared on a hit list together with that of his superior, Major General Veery, was it only the latter who received adequate protection? Colonel Kinnear must be commended, and we want to honor Mrs. Kinnear for having the courage to pursue this matter and appear before the Committee of Police. Mrs. Nicky Kinnear and Colonel Kinnear represents the best of SAPS. In the words of the committee, until the committee deals with the leadership of the SAPS, we will not be able to deal with the assassination of Colonel Kinnear. We support the Committee on Police in this crucial endeavor. The ACDP would like to add that the response by the Minister of Police, Becky Cele, included in the report is ambiguous, vague, and lacking in necessary detail, and it is simply not good enough. Lastly, the murder of Colonel Kinnear was an attack on the state, whose responsibility it is to uphold the rule of law in defense of human sanctity, safety, and security. The state cannot uphold the rule of law while those opposite to Colonel Kinnear run amok in South Africa's security institutions. We owe our allegiance to men like Colonel Kinnear and their families, who remains resolute in their commitment to make South Africa a safer place by confronting evil, and who in doing so make the ultimate sacrifice. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Sukers. UDM? UDM? Uyangaba manje. ATM? Good. NFP? AIC? COPE? PAC? Al-Jamaa? ANC?
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Honorable Deputy Speaker and members, please allow me to present the Kinnear petition report before the House. It is exactly a year since Lieutenant Colonel.
Honorable Member, kindly take off your mask. Notice that all speakers have been doing so. So we also want others to read your lips. Go ahead, ma'am. Order, order.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. It's exactly a year since Lieutenant Colonel Charl Kinnear was brutally assassinated at his home at Bishop Labors. In front of his wife, Nicolette Kinnear, and their children, may his soul rest in peace. Honorable Deputy Speaker, the Portfolio Committee of Police received a petition that was referred
two by the Speaker, which was coming from Mrs. Nicolette Kinnear, the widow of the assassinated Colonel Kinnear, on the 13th of November 2020. The Portfolio Committee of Police met on the 23rd of February 2021 to consider the petition. The petition was tabled in the Portfolio Committee by Mrs. Nicolette Kinnear, who had requested for the PC to investigate the matter and help in answering the questions as to why the police protection was withdrawn, though there was clear evidence that her husband's life was in danger. The primary interest of petition is to uncover what really happened and get the significant information around the death of her husband, and most important, to get justice for her husband. Honorable Deputy Speaker and members, the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, Section 56D, says the National Assembly or any of its committees may receive a petition, representation, or submission from an interest person or institution. Subsequently, Section 69G provides same clause for the NCOP, and Ms. Kinnear is the presenting a petition to the Portfolio Committee, and it is in her rights to do that. Ms. Kinnear thanked the PC and appreciate the opportunity granted to her and her family by the PC to present the events that lead to the death of her husband and to seek clarity on the questions she has around the death of her husband. Honorable Deputy Speaker, Colonel Kinnear was a dedicated member of the Blue family, which is the South African Police Service. He served the people of the Republic with distinctions. He was a hard-working and dedicated police officer, and he worked under a very dangerous unit in the Western Cape, particularly in the Cape Town, which is the anti-gang unit. Ms. Kinnear made a submission to the Portfolio Committee and provided that background in the serious events that transpired. Ms. Kinnear said that she strongly believed that her husband was failed by his own subs, that the death of her husband came as a result of negligence from the police. She further argued that her husband was killed because of the nature of the job he was doing. Like any other soldier, he died in the battlefield with his boots on. His assassination was as a result of the investigation he was busy with. He was killed because of his expertise and his preparedness to fight against gangs and drugs in the Western Cape. Ms. Kinnear felt that and continued to feel that the public was robbed a great principled police officer, and as family, they were robbed as husband and a father to their children. Ms. Kinnear concluded by saying that she wanted answers. The 24-hour security was withdrawn or removed on the 3rd to the 18th of September, which ultimately was the day he was brutally murdered at his house. The members of the PC expressed their feelings on the matter. There were questions raised. All the PC members sympathized with the family of the Kinnear on their loss. Honorable Deputy Speaker, Colonel Kinnear was once again another victim to the criminals and was useless of the subs, in particular the anti-gang unit, both in the Western Cape and Gauteng province, and the loss to the society at large. The members of the committee expressed their dissatisfaction on what has happened, that subs has lost 2 senior officials in a similar manner in the same month and the same year, prove that there is a clear organized crime to cover certain illegal trades. The National Commissioner extended his condolences to the Kinnear family on behalf of subs and provided a brief on subs security policy number 3 of 2019, which made a provision for protection of subs members in case of threat to their lives. That an interim measures is put in place while there is threat assessments is done, and in case of the near threat assessment was not completed. The PC and police are committed in ensuring the truth come out and justice for Kinnear remain a priority. In conclusion, Deputy Speaker, we thank Ms. Nicolette Kinnear for standing up for justice, for her husband and his rights, but also their mensenrechten. Elke mens in ons land en in die wêreld het 'n reg om te lewe. Friends, in conclude that polisie man en vrou moet beskerm word in die polisie mag. Killing our policemen, stop killing our police women. Genoeg is genoeg.
Ongelukkig is het tijd nog oor. Honorable member.
The ANC support, I thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable members, I now request the Chief Whip to tell us what we should do.
Genoeg is genoeg. I hereby move that the House adopts this report. Thank you.
The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections? No objections agreed to. This sitting will be suspended. The proceedings until 15 hours. Bells will be rung to alert members to the resumption of the sitting. The sitting is suspended. Masangu.
ANC members, please come. The Chief Whip is calling you here. The side, please.
Are you back this afternoon?
Recording stopped.